The night had already drained every last drop of strength from Bryson Hale, yet when he saw the woman stumbling dangerously close to the edge of the parking lot ramp, something inside him snapped into action, even before his mind understood what was happening. The sharp glow of the overhead lights carved out her silhouette, expensive coat slipping from her shoulders, heels barely supporting her weight, her breath unsteady, as if the entire world had tilted beneath her feet. Bryson didn't know her name, didn't know why she was alone this late, didn't even know that the next 60 seconds would change both of their lives. All he knew was that someone was about to fall, and he couldn't let that happen. He ran, and just as she leaned too far forward, her foot slipping on the slick concrete, Bryson caught her by the arms, steady, firm, protective, without realizing he had just rescued his own CEO. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and humanity still existing in this world, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Touch of Kindness. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Bryson had never expected to cross paths with Alera, the famously intimidating executive known for her sharp, strategic mind and even sharper tone. She was the kind of woman whose presence caused entire meeting rooms to straighten their backs and hold their breaths. Yet here she was, fragile and hurting in a way no one ever saw, her eyes unfocused, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to steady herself. She whispered an apology so faint he wasn't even sure she meant for anyone to hear it. Bryson didn't try to judge, didn't try to question. He simply guided her to sit on a nearby bench, removed her shoes so she wouldn't trip again, and handed her the bottle of water he always kept in his backpack. The entire parking structure was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic outside, and for a long moment Bryson wondered what kind of pain drove someone with everything to drink until they were barely standing. It had been a long day for him too. He had just finished his shift as a warehouse stocker for Corp, a job he kept because it offered stable mornings for his daughter, Suri, a bright 9-year-old who still believed her father could fix anything. Bryson's life was a cycle of early breakfasts, school drop-offs, 12-hour shifts, and late-night exhaustion, yet he never complained. Ever since his wife passed 3 years ago, he lived for those small moments when Suri would fall asleep against his arm, trusting him completely. He promised himself he would never fail her, even as the bills piled up, even as he silently counted coins some nights to make sure she had what she needed. Now he sat beside his CEO, keeping a careful distance, unsure of what to do next. Alera leaned her head back against the cold wall behind the bench and closed her eyes. In the harsh fluorescent lighting, she looked nothing like the woman who commanded an empire every morning. There was no tailored suit, no perfectly composed expression, just a human being whose world had clearly cracked somewhere beneath all the power and money she carried. Bryson checked her pulse, her breathing, anything to make sure she was okay, then called a cab using his own account, because he knew no driver would trust someone in her condition. When the car arrived, he helped her inside and gave the driver her address. Stunned by the upscale location but refusing to treat her any differently, the driver hesitated, eyeing Bryson suspiciously, so Bryson handed over his ID, explaining that he worked for her and didn't want her to be left alone. He followed the cab in his old sedan, tired but determined. At her high-rise apartment building, Bryson felt strangely out of place among the marble floors and soft lighting, yet he carried her shoes, her purse, and even her coat, making sure nothing was left behind. The concierge recognized her, quickly unlocking the elevator. Bryson guided her into the luxurious penthouse where floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the entire city glowing beneath the night sky. It was beautiful, but empty, an emptiness he felt deep in his chest as he looked around. He settled her on the couch, placed a glass of water on the table, set a blanket over her shoulders, and left quietly, feeling oddly protective of someone he barely knew. The next morning began like any other for Bryson. He woke Suri gently, braided her hair, tied her shoes, and walked her to school holding her hand. Her laughter, pure and bright, cut through the lingering heaviness he felt from the previous night. After dropping her off, he hurried to work, hoping no one would find out he had been in the CEO's home like some trespasser. He had no idea what would follow. Alera arrived 2 hours later, sober, sharp, but with something different in her eyes. She walked through the warehouse floor with purpose, her heels echoing against the concrete. Everyone stiffened, assuming a surprise inspection, but she wasn't there for them. She was looking for someone specific. When she reached Bryson, he expected reprimand, suspicion, maybe even a firing. Instead, she simply stood there, breathing lightly, her expression unreadable but not cold. Alera spent the entire day thinking about what had happened. She remembered faint fragments the edge of the ramp, her knees growing weak, a pair of hands catching her before she collapsed. She remembered the steady voice telling her she was safe. She remembered her apartment door closing softly. And most of all, she remembered the warmth of someone who had nothing to gain from helping her. For a woman who had been surrounded by people who only approached her for favors, contracts, or access, it felt almost unreal. She watched Bryson sorting shipments now, sleeves rolled up, muscles tense with effort. There was no trace of the man who had carried her purse and shoes, no hint that he expected anything in return. Alera approached him with a gravity that silenced the warehouse. Bryson's heart raced in his chest. He feared this might be the moment everything went wrong. But things didn't go wrong. They changed. Alera asked him to meet her in her office after his shift, her voice strangely gentle. The entire warehouse buzzed with rumors, glances, and whispers. Bryson stayed silent, finishing his work with nervous fingers. When he entered her office, she remained quiet for a long moment, watching him, not as an employee but as a man who had seen her at her most vulnerable. She thanked him, not with a simple phrase, but with a depth that felt heavy with sincerity. She explained haltingly that last night had broken something open inside her. She told him she had been struggling with pressure for months, carrying responsibilities that felt crushing even with all her success. She confessed she had pushed herself too far, trying to outrun her loneliness. And then she asked him two questions that caught him completely off guard: why he helped her, and what she could do to repay him. Bryson brushed off the second question, insisting he didn't want anything. But Alera noticed the hesitation in his eyes, the exhaustion, the weight, the quiet selflessness that had probably gone unrecognized for years. She gently pushed further, asking him about his life. When he reluctantly explained his situation, mentioning Suri, the long hours, and the difficulty of offering her anything beyond the basics, something changed in her expression. Alera didn't give him charity. She gave him a chance. Over the next few days, she invited him to apply for a new supervisory position, one with better pay, stable hours, and opportunities for advancement. Bryson hesitated, afraid of favoritism accusations, but Alera insisted. He had every qualification and had been overlooked for too long. She simply noticed what should have been noticed, and soon he became the team leader, earning enough to breathe, easier for the first time in years. What Bryson didn't expect was the growing connection between them. Alera found herself drawn to his sincerity, his resilience, and the quiet strength he carried without realizing it. She admired how he loved his daughter, how he never complained, how he held himself with dignity despite everything he had endured. Bryson, in turn, saw a woman who wasn't just powerful but deeply human. She had wounds too. Scars carved by high expectations and a life spent under a spotlight that never dimmed. They became unlikely confidants, sometimes staying after work together in her glass-walled office while daylight painted golden stripes across the room. Alera eventually asked to meet Suri, nervous yet excited. Suri adored her instantly, proudly showing Alera her drawings and telling her about school. It was the first time in a long time that Alera felt genuinely welcomed by someone without fear or expectation. She began to join Bryson and Suri for weekend activities, daytime walks at the park, small lunch picnics, gentle moments she didn't realize she had been craving. The more time she spent with them, the more she began to reconsider what truly mattered in life. One afternoon, while sitting quietly on a park bench watching Suri chase pigeons, Alera turned to Bryson with a softness that felt like sunlight after years of storms. She admitted she had been thinking about that night over and over, realizing that his kindness hadn't just saved her from the edge of a ramp, it had saved her from the edge of herself. Bryson felt his chest tighten, realizing he had changed her life without meaning to. But she had changed his as well, offering him dignity, stability, and hope. Their connection deepened into something warm, careful, and real. It wasn't a fairy tale romance, written in dramatic gestures. It was built in quiet moments, shared glances, mutual respect, and a feeling of being seen for the first time. Bryson didn't expect to fall for a CEO, nor did Alera expect to find peace in the presence of a man who had far less than she did. But love often grows in the spaces created by unexpected kindness. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps us continue bringing emotional stories to life. Special request: comment "Kindness lives on" if you felt even one moment of this story in your heart. Alera and Bryson's lives never returned to what they were before that night. Instead, they built something new, something steady and precious, in the daylight of each ordinary morning. And sometimes the greatest changes begin with one simple act of kindness, offered when no one is watching.